Hi, everyone. Today we are interviewing Amber Booth-McCoy, who is the CEO of the Diversity Booth. She's a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist, and I feel extremely honored and privileged to have the opportunity to interview her today. Looks like she's just joined. I'm going to go ahead and wave. And let's see here. Go ahead and add her onto the conversation. Hey, Amber, we made it
Hello,
happen.
hello. Yes. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. And this is the first time actually we've had someone with your expertise on. So for the audience that's joining in, I see everyone coming in. We'll go ahead and give them the formal introduction. So
Before you
everyone,
do, I'll tell you,
yeah,
my friends and such that have joined in, and even my team that saw your questions, felt like these questions were so awesome that they were certainly were going to join. Mind you, these are people that have heard me talk about this stuff
yeah,
over and over again.
yeah.
But two, I hope that this is part one of two because
I
these
know.
questions are so so awesome that we could delve into so much more. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. I was actually Zishan actually just joined. So Zishan's the co-founder with me, and we were actually just talking on the phone prior to this. Like, I don't know if we're gonna get through this list of questions because this is gonna take so long. So I'm so happy that you brought that up because that would be amazing. We'd love to have a part 1, 2, 3, and on, and I'm sure everyone else would as well.
Well, let's shoot for three. Let's go for part one, two, and three. We just go ahead and make that a
Boom.
thing right now. Boom.
I'm down. Let's do it. Awesome. Awesome. So for everyone that's joining, Amber Booth-McCoy is a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. She is the CEO of the Diversity Booth, and she speaks at numerous corporations all around the United States about her expertise and how to create a better culture, more inclusivity, etc. And it's an honor and privilege to have her on today. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So
And I love what I do. So we can call it, being an expert, but I just call it loving what I do.
awesome. We mostly have interviewed entrepreneurs on this page, so that is really what we're all striving for, is to love what we do. So I love that you mentioned that. That's amazing.
Mhm.
I guess to start off just with quickly with your background, I've seen your TED Talk multiple times. I know you're an Arkansas native, but
I know.
but beyond that, sort of, if you could tell us a little bit about kind of where you're from, how you grew up. You're an entrepreneur now, and kind of what
Yeah.
led up to that path.
Okay. I am from Little Rock, Arkansas. I come from a two-parent home. I have one sibling, my sister, Courtney Ray. She is my best friend in the world, and she just got engaged this weekend. So
Oh, I
please,
saw that.
yes.
Nice.
So please know, I'm excited. I am. I grew up as the daughter of a principal, so absolutely just love learning, reading, and just being a lover of stories and learning about stories. And so that's even what my company does is by creating culture change is focusing on the stories and the emotional learning and growth that happens through storytelling.
Beautiful, beautiful. When you, I guess, graduated, say, high school,
Hmm.
did you have this sort of career path in mind? Is this something, how did it
No.
come up? How did it come up in
So
the process?
no one tells you that diversity is a field, right? You don't know growing up. And even, I have friends that are like, what now? What's that? Right.
Yeah. Right.
I first wanted to be the next Oprah. I studied radio, television, film,
Okay.
first at Henderson State, and then even mass media at Euler, which is now called UA of Little Rock. And after that, I found psychology because for both of those fields, for me, it was about the people. It was about being able to tell stories and get to know people and ask introspective questions. And the psychology part of it for me was getting to know why people do what they do. And so that is where I guess my interest in just the mind and behaviors and shifting behaviors came from. And I started, if you will, this work. So I am still at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and I've been there for almost 8 years. So I didn't know, like I said, diversity was a field, but they had a diversity committee, like many organizations.
Yeah.
And I had a boss that came and he said, and so that's a boss that, I mean, I still consider a friend and mentor now.
Right.
He said, listen, I need an idea for diversity month. And I've always been a creative. I love, I mean, whether it's poetry or any of that. So
Yeah.
I went home, being the overachiever that I am, and brought him a 12-month diversity plan because
Oh,
I
wow.
could not conceive putting diversity in 1 month. I mean,
Exactly.
even with not knowing that it was a field, it just felt wrong to say we're going to use this 1 month to talk about
Right.
diversity.
Right.
So he said, I can't present this without you. So come to the diversity committee with me. And from there, from the diversity committee, I moved to our diversity, the division of diversity, which is where I still am. And
Okay.
from there, just kind of skyrocketed.
Wow. And that's at the university, right?
At the university, it skyrocketed. And then as far as becoming an entrepreneur, it was people asking outside of UAMS, how do I go about, you know, how do I go about, you coming to speak here, or how can you help me with strategic planning here? And I
Right.
thought, oh, I should probably charge for that. Oh, I
Yeah.
should probably,
Yeah.
I should probably figure that out. And then the last thing I'll say about that is my mother came up with the name. The Diversity Booth is, of course, a play on my last name, and I love all things cheesy, corny, and tongue in cheek. So we kept
Awesome.
it.
Me too. Okay. I saw that on the company page, you guys have been posting for a while. It seemed like since late 2019. And so I was wondering, how was your transition when COVID-19 hit? And that's the question that I ask most
Mhm.
entrepreneurs that come on here.
So the funny thing is, you said in one of the questions, is it like how in the early years of your business?
Hmm.
And this is the early years. I
Yeah.
am grateful as can be that we've had the
Yeah.
success we've had in the short amount of time that we've been, established. So in 2019, we had engagements, but like everyone else, when COVID hit in 2020, it went to virtual. So instead of going to these places, everything became virtual. And
Right.
then not only just COVID, but the civil unrest. When the
Right.
civil unrest, of course, and things happened, then it was, okay, something is broken in society. Who can talk to us about this? And it was nonstop. 2020 was nonstop for the diversity booth.
Right.
We had some amazing clients that we're still working with that gave us international reach. And I'm excited to be still working with those international tech companies, as well as the companies that we're working here just nationwide. So I think the
Oh,
thing that made us different in 2020 was the intentionality. Whether we were on a call with a client or whether I was on a call with my team, we checked in with the whole person. Before we start a meeting, it was maybe even like this one. If you had to describe your day using a weather event, what would that be? And it kind of takes that pressure off of, oh, we're about to have a business meeting. And then you get to hear from, individuals and
yeah.
how they're feeling. And a lot of times it was affirming for others. Maybe you said your weather event was a sunny day, but someone else said they were in a hurricane
Yeah.
and your day was in a hurricane. You got
Yeah.
to, kind of connect with that. So intentionality, I think, is what made us, and I won't say different because there are other companies that were being intentional, but kind of made us special. And then allowing space. There were times where in 2020 we asked, do you have the emotional bandwidth to have this meeting? If you don't, we can reschedule.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. There was nothing going to be so urgent that we couldn't pause and do it the next day so that the whole person can be present for that meeting.
Right. That's pretty amazing of you guys to say that, because a lot of folks would just take the quick buck, particularly when the demand skyrocketed after the George Floyd protests and all that. And I'm actually really curious. So, a lot of sort of the diversity and inclusion activity that we see for me as a former employee, and just, a lot of my friends being still in the in tech or banking or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. A lot of the diversity and inclusion activity from big corporations seems to be performative or sort of short term without any long term plan in place. Or it could even be as simple as, hey, we need diversity. Well, let's hire a Black person and maybe hire a Latinx person and
Right.
call it a day. And I've been on some clubhouse rooms where folks are talking about that extensively, and how obviously that's not how you solve the challenge. So, what sort of long term recommendation or plan do you give to your clients after, say, having a one-off speaking engagement with their employees or their team?
Well, first, I never recommend one-off speaking engagements. If
Yeah.
you would like for me to come to be a keynote at something, then that's fine. I'm going to speak about what you asked.
Right.
If you are seeking culture change, one workshop is not going to do it.
Right.
So I encourage, and not just individuals, but clients to look at the D, E, and the I, the diversity, because diversity deals with representation. Diversity deals with the broad spectrum of individuals, experiences, and identities that are present. Are they there? Inclusion deals with the fact that that's a feeling. Inclusion is the culture. And then equity, a lot of people confuse equity and equality. Equality is where we give out things equally, and equity is where we give what is needed to whom it is needed, right? So in speaking to your point, the difference between saying I'm going to hire a Black woman, or I'm going to hire a Latinx woman, or I'm going to hire a South Asian woman is the difference between targeting versus tokenism. A lot of times what you see in organizations is tokenism, meaning I want to hire this identity and any old one will do. That is tokenism.
Right.
Targeting is saying, you know what, this is the identity I'm looking for. Where can I find them? Because there are qualified, educated, and career-ready people ready to go with that identity. How do I locate them? Right? And then you're intentional about marketing in those spaces.
Right.
You're intentional about making sure that those individuals maybe you're looking for Black women. Are you partnering with HBCUs? Maybe you're looking for, women-owned organizations. Are you looking in your city with they're registered
Right.
in your states, right? Are you making a concerted effort? Again, targetism, tokening, not the same.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So what do you, I wanted to kind of dig even further. So when you recommend coming out to do multiple workshops, I mean, what's kind of the ABCs of it? How often do you come out? What is your goal or intention? Obviously it's customized to each company, right? And kind of depending on, you meet them where they're at and go from there. But what's sort of your game plan?
I need to know their goal. What is your end game? Is your end game to change the culture, right? And a lot of times companies reach out to me after there's been an incident, right?
Yeah,
After
reactive.
Right. After something has happened, and now that if something has blown up, and then they're like, oh, can Amber come fix it? And I'm like, oh, no, your culture.
Yeah.
And there aren't any workshops that are going to necessarily do that. I start with leadership. So my ABCs, it has to start from the top. One of my favorite quotes is from Remember the Titans. And
it's my favorite movie. If I don't know this quote, I'm gonna be mad.
It is my favorite movie. And so if you remember when Julius and Superman, Gary Bertier are standing outside after practice, and he was like, and you tell him to block for us, this and that. And then Julius says, attitude reflects leadership, Captain.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, attitude reflects leadership in every organization. What that leader values is what will trickle down. If your boss cares that you turn in things on time, but not that you're there from 8 to 5, you're going to turn in things on time, but you're not going to get to work till 10, right? Attitude reflects leadership.
Right.
If your company says, well, employees can say this to customers and they don't get in trouble, but you cannot eat the French fries out of somebody's lunchbox, you're not going to eat the French fries, but you're going to cuss out customers. Okay.
Right.
So when we say attitude reflects leadership, I'm starting there first, because what they endorse, what they support, and what they model is what will trickle down. What they allow and who they hold accountable for these things is what will shape the culture. So I recommend the cultural sweet spot. It's what I call it. The cultural sweet spot is where we start with the intrapersonal, right? Where we are learning how to take accountability and how to basically be inclusive on a personal level. And that's cultural humility, right? So we're learning cultural humility. Cultural responsiveness is what I want to teach my leaders, because being a leader requires being culturally responsive in the sense that you need to understand the day after the George Floyd, murder, you need to make a statement, and it needs to be in context. That's culturally responsive.
Right.
And then cultural accountability is when this happens or when this doesn't happen, how do we hold people accountable? A lot of times companies will have this zero tolerance policy. I don't advocate for those. That's crazy. We're human and we're going to err, and to err is human, right? So I advocate for accountability and education, right? There's a difference between calling out and calling in. Calling out is when you are seeking to shame. Calling out is when it's right. You're not looking to educate, whereas calling in means that you have the opportunity to educate and possibly get an ally after that conversation. Right. So I don't do one-off workshops. I recommend cultural assessments. We have to find out where your company even is before we can figure out where they're going to go, right? We need to know where's that benchmark? Where is, the baseline for, are they ready to grow?
Right.
Because trying to shift culture without leadership is impossible. After that, then we're going to look at some learning plans and some formal and informal learning opportunities. That's the part I love. I love the informal learning opportunities. So what that looks like for our company, a lot of times are facilitated conversations. And that is what we did a lot of in 2020. We often call them virtual healing spaces, where we will have conversations that are very authentic and transparent. And it's not me talking, which is my favorite part, but it's individuals getting to learn from each other and those same stories that I was telling you about.
Well, this is quite multifaceted and well thought out. I love it. This is awesome. I wanted to transition a little bit into the questions that we have. And you mentioned calling in. And, what sparked this list of questions that we created, Zishan and I kind of collaborated on, was frankly a lot of, from what has transpired over this past year and a lot of conversation that we've had. I was out, Zishan and I both, and friends that are watching this page right now and will watch later, were out at the George Floyd protests here in Los Angeles. Zishan and I, kind of like the quick story about how we started. We felt like we wanted to, first of all, we had a deep interest to start an online business for like the past 5 years. And we were just totally putting that off. And so, we would have late night conversations on New Year's Eve about what's happening to, the plight of the sort of economic inequality in the country. And we talk about everything from education to job opportunity to entrepreneurship, and how sort of that landscape is significantly different depending on what race you are or what zip code you were born into, right? So, and we would talk about this, again, on New Year's Eve, we go talk about it at 3, 4 in the morning. And so we did have this sort of interest.
Sounds like me and my friends, don't that's normal.
And this desire, we wanted to do something about it. This desire to do something. That's kind of the birth of the TheAllyBox, and collaborating with female-founded, Black-owned businesses and sort of marketing them free of charge, and collaborating with them. And our clients so far have been Google and PwC. So that's been cool.
Love it.
And actually, one quick thing, actually, I know it's a little random, but I spoke with the representative who we're corresponding with at Google to maybe get the founders some FaceTime on a Zoom, because it's a virtual women in commerce event that they're doing. And so it's going to be amazing exposure for them. So they're super excited. I'm super excited. Anyways, launching this business, and then also posting a lot of stuff on my personal profile, about Black Lives Matter and our need to backlash. Right. Yeah. And the need to educate ourselves about what's going on. And obviously me, myself, and Zishan, and all of us learning about the Black experience and what we can do to help, and listening and things like that. And so a lot of these questions have come up through conversations in DMs, right? Phone conversations. And so I think people are really going to find a lot of value in this, because I would imagine that they're having similar conversations with their friends. And as sort of outsiders looking in that aren't Black, we're sort of looking for guidance, answers to basic questions. And like you said, when you encounter folks that are clearly, perhaps not supporters of Black Lives Matter, or sort of have come from a very different background than I have, being a South Asian, grown up in, immigrant parents coming to America, and mostly being around a lot of diversity growing up here in Los Angeles, folks are going to have a different upbringing, a different perspective. And so naturally, sort of going back to that point about calling in versus calling out, and that comes into play, right there in the direct messages, on the phone conversation, on the Zoom call. and it's so tough. And I'm really happy to see so many friends here attend the live because, again, we're going to go ahead and dive in. I think people are going to find a lot of value.
I'm ready.
So,
I'm ready.
so the first question that I have here, what are the common misconceptions people have about anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion practices? And that's a two-part question, so I'll ask the second part after.
Okay. A lot of the misconceptions is that there are about to be identities or populations that are going to receive preferential treatment or special treatment, and that is unequal. So a lot of times that's what I hear is that everybody has this opportunity, or that we don't talk about things in context. And so even with the second part, I know you haven't asked it, but how to combat these things, or I'll say as far as the misconception, we often treat inclusion like pie. And we hear this and we think that more for someone else means less for me. Less, that whatever it is, that I'm going to get less of it now because we're going to include other people, right? But that's not true. That's not how equity works, and that's not how inclusivity works. And so as far as misconceptions, I'll say that I often, and it's not a joke, I mean it. I say that I want to come in a place and take up space. I want to take up so much space when I come in a place that 3 people can sit down next to me. And what I mean by that is I've taken up so much space with my multidimensional self that I don't have to be just one facet of who I am, that I can be everything that I am, and that I empower those next to me and around me to do so as well. And then inclusion, we stop looking at it like pie and look at it like water. Well, then it's very different. Yeah. Water is the strongest force on earth, right? So the more we have, then the stronger we are. The more space that we take up individually, the more we're giving to ourselves. We don't have to hide who we are. We're talking about race, as far as Black Lives Matter and things in this conversation, but there are those hidden identities, such as depression or anxiety and, other things that come along with mental health that we're often afraid to share. Well, if I come in a space and I say, well, yes, I am Black, and I most certainly have dealt with depression and anxiety my whole life. If you have dealt with that, then you may feel empowered to share as well. We've brought that to the forefront. We've brought that to the table. That person who has carried that now isn't hiding it. That's another facet of themselves, if you will, that they are now taking up space and showing who they are, right? So it's not about just giving to the other people. Every single time we make room for other people, we make room for ourselves.
I love that explanation. I'm a little worried because I just realized that this list of questions, I want to make sure that we pour a lot of time for Q&A. I know my partner and I had talked about that earlier because we got a few more questions.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. I'm not going anywhere. I know we're going to do a 3-part series, but I also want to, the folks that are here, I want to give them an opportunity to. Everyone that's watching, thank you, first of all, for joining us. There's a question box here, and we're going to sort of open up that question box probably in the next 18 minutes, so around 7:15. If you have any questions, pop them in there, and then we can continue with our list of questions later, and that way everybody can get some direct answers to their questions as well. The next question that I have here is, could you give us an overview of common microaggressions? And I know I wrote in and out of the workplace, but it could be in just generally too.
So microaggressions, first, is a term that was coined by Dr. Chester Pierce, and he was a Harvard psychiatrist. And it deals with the little slubs or slights that happen based upon identity, typically race. And so I often liken microaggressions to paper cuts. Like, you're not going to necessarily die from a paper cut, but 1,000 paper cuts a day is no way to live. So these are things that basically sound like, for instance, if I were talking to someone who maybe is Black, but maybe their first language is is Ave. It stands for African American Vernacular English. That right. is most certainly a language. It's not slang. It's not hood. It's not any of that. It's a language. Or maybe you're talking to someone who has a Chinese ethnicity, right? And a very strong accent. And someone says, "Ooh, you speak good English." Why would you assume that someone's first language isn't English because they are what, right? Like, it's right. The assumptions that are made. Right. Or microaggressions sound like, you know what, Amber, you are such an articulate Black woman. Why am I articulate? Because I'm Black? Because it's what I call intent does not equal impact, right? So someone may intend something and they
Right.
may call it be as benign as what Bruce Banner, but it lands on someone like the Hulk. That's
Right.
what microaggressions are. So this is, oh, I don't see color. I am colorblind. First of all, if you are not blind and you are not colorblind, you see all this Hershey, okay? You see it, okay? So while being a Black woman may not be the sum total of who or what I am, it very much informs how I navigate, engage, and operate in society, right? So when someone says, I don't see it, it's almost like trying to erase that lived experience. That is a microaggression, right? A microaggression is being ignored, right? If you are ignoring, let's say if you're in line and this person of this Black, Indigenous, or person of color is ignored, but they happen to just so happen to see all of the white people in line, that is a microaggression, right? Microaggressions are going to be anything, if you will, where you're making assumptions, even if they are slight and they may seem small, and it has to do with someone's identity, particularly race.
You had mentioned color blindness, and obviously that was included in the title of your TEDx talk.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say to those people that sort of aspire to be colorblind and not see race? Do you think that that's a healthy sort of route to pursue?
Well, not only is it not healthy, but we love to see color in nature. We love to see color in fashion. We love to see color in art. Well, there are 7 billion beautiful complexions around this globe. Why would you not want to see them? Right? Why would you not want to see? You wouldn't want to look into a field of flowers and say, yep, those are flowers, right? Like you want to see all the various colors, and the same should be with individuals. But the other part is anyone seeking to be an ally at all, how can you fix something that you're not willing to see? That's impossible.
Mhm.
Race is, and it's also speaking about things in context. You were talking about a misconception. A lot of the misconceptions that are had are because we don't talk about things with historical context and we don't talk about them in context, right? So how can you, race is not, race in itself is not killing anyone. No one ever has just woken up and like, oh, I'm Black, ugh, and then died. That has
Yeah.
never happened. In fact, most Black people I know really love being Black, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's not it. Racial bias, racial discrimination, racial prejudice is what causes these disparities in healthcare, in education, in criminal justice, in the workforce, right? So how can we fix it if we're not willing to see it?
When we started this business here, obviously we're supporting Black-owned businesses. You know, I got direct messages and had conversation with folks that brought up the point, you know, why would I want to support a Black-owned business? Wouldn't that be unequal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that affect, say, a white business down the street? So if I got a few small businesses on my street and I
Mm-hmm.
decide not to support the white-owned businesses on my street and go elsewhere to support a Black-owned business, isn't that something that's not just, not equal,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et
Okay.
cetera. And so, obviously, like I have some insight into this, but
Right.
I want to hear your response because, you know, I think this would be a helpful response for the folks that have raised this question with me privately and,
Mm-hmm.
maybe get value from it later.
Okay. So first, the answer or the question that that person has to ask themselves, do you support your current businesses because they're white? Right? And if the answer is no, like if there's this immediate, I don't just go to whatever this business is because they're white, well, then no one, for the most part, is asking anyone to just choose Black owned businesses and go to them just because they're Black. You found the current businesses that you like, right? Because you like them. Like you sought them out and you found maybe it's this restaurant, this type of food, like whatever the service is, you found them. You didn't find them because they were white. Now, first and foremost, when it comes to Black owned businesses, what's the percentage of Black owned businesses in America? Do you know?
I don't. I'm sure we put out a infographic about it a long time ago, but I'm sure it's not very many. It's got to be
So
probably less than like less than
it's
10%.
less than 10, and it's about 2%, right?
Okay.
And then even when you're looking at small businesses, so that's going to be 10 or more, or 10 or more employees, only 7% of Black businesses even have 10 or more employees. So the reason that we're not talking about equality is because equality is already a law. Okay, you already have laws that say you must treat people equally and you must this, but we still have the disparities that we have, right? Okay. Equity is where you give what is needed to whom it is needed. It is inherently unequal, right? We didn't get the disparities that we have by giving equally. We didn't get these gaps in wealth by giving equally, so we're not going to fix them by giving equally. Now, you can go, here's how I guess you talk through this logically. If you're going to lunch, can you give me maybe 3 fast food chains?
Chipotle, McDonald's, and let's go with. I wish I could think. I'm vegan, so I wish I could think of vegan
Right?
fast food.
Good. So
But
that's my next question.
but
Right? So let's
there's
say Burger King, right? All
all
right.
right for sure.
All right. Now, for many of us that are vegan or gluten free, can you give me maybe 2 restaurants where you know that have gluten free or or vegan options?
Fast food places,
No, no,
Chipotle.
just any restaurants wherever.
Oh yeah, I mean Whole Foods. I mean
Okay.
restaurant, grocery store, and then where else do I like to go? I mean, there's a lot of like niche places. There's a
Mm-hmm.
place called Lettuce Feast LA. I like that place. It's a
Okay.
food truck in LA.
Now, well, not you because you are, this is your field, but the average person, then I would ask them, give me 2 Black owned restaurants where you can find vegan options. All right. And it's
Right,
going to be a little harder. Give
right.
me 2 Black owned restaurants where you can find, right? So the point is the availability heuristic. That is it's a cognitive bias that we talk about in the field of diversity. And we rely on immediate information, or right? Now, when you're going to lunch, you're trying to find something quick,
Yeah,
okay?
by my
Which means
house.
that you're going to go to what you remember, what you know most. So you're patroning those white businesses. You're already doing that. When we say buy Black owned, you're having to intentionally seek out, try them the same way you did those other companies that you found out you like. No one is asking you to go buy food from places that you've tasted and you're like, oh, this is bad, but they're
Yeah,
Black, so
no,
I got to buy it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So be as intentional about understanding that when you support a Black owned business, first and foremost, only 1% of Black owned businesses receive loans in their first year. All right. That number looks vastly different for every other ethnicity.
Yeah, especially
Okay.
Asians,
Every
Asians,
exactly.
whites.
Most
Yeah,
certainly. Most certainly. So that looks vastly different. So what you are saying is that you understand when you support a Black owned business, and when it comes to Black owned, about 36% of Black owned businesses are women, right? So that's woman and Black owned, which is a higher percentage than any other race or ethnicity. What
wow.
you are saying when you are supporting a Black owned business, first of all, is that I'm acknowledging you don't have access to the same resources and that you don't have access to the same federal fundings or even state funding. And I'm supporting you because dang it, you should, right? That's what you're saying. 2, you're saying, I like your product. I'm going to test this product, whatever it is, and I'm going to share. When we say support, that means that after you try it, you tell 5 friends about it so that they can try it. And then 3, if you're saying also that you're supporting Black owned, especially when we're talking about Black women, and it's the same with, and we'll tie this into Black Lives Matter, the numbers and the data also shows that the average Black owned, woman owned business pour back into their community at a rate of 3 to 4 times more than their counterparts, right?
Well, that's
So what
amazing.
you're saying when you support a Black owned woman business is that I am supporting Black lives because Black women owned businesses pour back into their communities, right? So you're knocking out all of those things at the same time. Now, if you can hear all of those things, one, that they don't have access to capital. So when you see a Black owned business, they've been grinding. They have been put,
And we hear
they
their
have
stories all the time here.
that's
Yeah,
it. They have been putting their nose to the grindstone because they don't have these resources like other people. They don't have the employee or the base, the support, and that those Black women are pouring back into those communities. if you can hear all of that and still go, but I need to support the white people, have they not been supported? They have. No one's asking you to stop supporting white companies. We're saying add to your list of companies these people. That's all. And if
Right.
you can hear that and still have opposition, then your issue is only because they are Black. And that's a whole different subject, because that's about anti-Blackness.
Right. Right. Would you want to respond to this comment here? Let's see here. We got one. Yes, I agree. We want to see colors with a caveat. Without the interpretations of our mind, we want to see colors just for what they are.
I think that also goes back when you say just for what they are. Okay. So each and every person, regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender, all of that, has bias, right? We all have bias, and bias in and of itself is not bad. There is implicit bias, which is the unconscious, and then there's the explicit, which is the things that you know, like your favorite color is a bias. Bias is just bias are just preferences or associations. All right. Now, if you're saying we want to see colors just for what they are, the thing is, do so in context. Be honest about what you are seeing. Be honest about what you're ingesting. Be honest about the media and what the media shows you about different populations, identities, and then acknowledge that what the media shows you plays a part in the associations that you make all together about those same identities. So as much as with your explicit and conscious choices, you are saying, this is what I believe. I don't treat people differently. I care and I treat everyone equally. Know that until you have done extensive and explicit work to know your biases and to work to change them, then you're going to perpetrate and perpetuate the same barriers and systems that have put those disparities in place. So you're not just seeing color, I guess is what I'm saying. It's none of us. Until we know that script in the back of our head personally, then we're doomed to repeat it. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. I didn't say that. Dr. Jung did.
I was gonna say that was amazing. Chloe, that was so eloquently put. Thank you so much for giving that elaborate explanation, because I think we're gonna clip that up and make a clip out of it. We'll send that to you. That was amazing, and I think that that helps me and hopefully a lot of other people in conversations with friends, coworkers, etc., about sort of this topic, like you said, seeing people just as they are, and that comes up in conversation, right? So. Okay, I'm looking at this list. We actually covered quite a few of these. Okay, this is a big one. So I'm gonna do one last story, and then after this one, we'll open up to questions. As expected, we left off a few questions up here, but that's okay. So I'm gonna start off with a quick story, and then I'll go into the question. So, you know, one of my good friends, ex-coworkers, is white. Grew up. You know, in an area with not much diversity, well-off, well-to-do family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, conversations about race would come up, and this stat would get thrown around. And this is about 5-6 years ago. Like, I'd be walking to the Century City Mall, and like this stat would come up that he would reference. And then, you know, in recent years, as we've reconnected through social media, I'd get DMs about similar things. So I'll just quickly mention it to you. And it might, and, you know, these are all tough conversations to have with our friends sometimes. And so I remember him saying, you know, Black folks make up at the time, I don't know, under 15% of the population, right? It's like 13, 14%,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And we're talking about board seats. We worked in investment banking and finance. We're talking about board seats for corporations. And so, you know, if you have 10 board members, why does more than one need to be Black when if we just stick to the ratio of the population, you know, 15 out of 100 seats would be Black, and it would sort of make sense because it would be equal. And so I remember him mentioning that, and then when I'd be posting about Black Lives Matter and things like from this page on my personal page, I got a direct message talking about, hey, you know, we're both basketball fans, sports fans. So he said something like, you know, I think the NBA is racist because the majority of the athletes in the NBA are Black, and it should really regress sort of to the natural distribution of the population. And I remember asking him, I didn't know if he was serious or he was joking, but he was serious. And that leads me to my question, because it was just kind of, it was a heavy moment, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly what is the right thing to say. Um, and, we're at such a critical time in this country where folks are so divided, and, you know, wanting to be an ally is also wanting to sort of bring unity and sort of bring peace and bring like more understanding and conversation and healthy conversation at that, and calling in as opposed to calling out. And
Mm-hmm.
so that leads me to my question, which is, how can you discuss anti-racism um, with white folks or non-black folks who harbor racism,
Mm-hmm. All right. So,
or like what they may not perceive to be racism?
okay. So I guess kind of tips and tools that I would give for just across the board. First, to understand the history, to do the research yourself, right? Um, Last year, and to check the narratives and talk about them in context. Last year, there was all this talk about women being able to vote for 100 years, right? Women can vote. What women have had 100 years to vote,
Right.
and when we talk about that historically and in context, is that accurate? No. Now, white women have had 100 years to be able to vote. Black women stood on those same steps with Ida B. Wells and other Black activists stood out there protesting at the time during the women's suffrage movement, and those Black women were still standing outside in 1964 asking for the same rights, right? So when we talk about how to move the needle, or when we talk about things in context, up until 1964, laws and all of these things were decided by not only one gender, but one race, right? It wasn't until after we added, the amendments and the civil rights, laws and things like that that allowed blacks to vote and things like that, that could blacks participate in civic engagement and things that affected their everyday lives, right? Now, that's what I mean by talking about things in context. Two, yes, when it's a board, when we're talking about boards and making sure that you have representation on those boards, it's going to look different because you have to ask the population that you're trying to serve. Okay. The population, if you are a company or a nonprofit organization and you're in this city, and in this city, for instance, in my city, in Little Rock, we're almost a minority majority city, right?
Yeah.
So if our boards look like what you just said, well, then that's not reflective. That doesn't
Mhm.
parity the population of what that we're trying to serve, right? If I'm in a city where blacks make up 20% of the population, Latin, Hispanic, or Mexican people make up this percentage of the population, right? Whites make up this percentage, but then the board doesn't reflect that, then there's an issue. If I am trying to serve that population, then I need to allow those voices that I'm trying to serve to be the ones to guide us. In the event that there are, like in the example you gave, 10 white people and one black person on this board, and let's say I'm in a city that, is 40% black, why would the white people be leading me in efforts to serve the black community?
Right.
The voices that we're seeking to amplify need to be the ones that need to be the loudest. And if it's just that one, I bet it's not the loudest,
Right.
right? So being able to talk about those things and have those tough conversations, right? And then the last thing I'll say is to flip the narrative or the question. When we're talking about the NBA, those people, the basketball players didn't hire themselves. The basketball players did not go, oh, please, someone, we're only going to draft ourselves and put ourselves in the league. You most certainly need to look at the racial makeup of the NBA, but I say look at the racial makeup of the owners of
Right.
those teams, right? Diversity deals with representation. Is there representation across the board, right? Is there representation at the highest levels? The Super Bowl was just on. All of these commercials had black people and black, indigenous, and people of color in these commercials, not just because it's Black History Month, because everybody's making a point to be more inclusive,
I
but
was in a
that's not,
commercial that
were you?
aired last week. Yeah, and it's exactly
Yes.
why I was in that commercial because of what you just said.
But that's diversity and not
Right.
inclusivity.
Right.
That's also not equity. Equity is where there are Black directors. Equity is where there are South Asian producers.
Right.
Equity is are the people behind the scenes able to make and create change. That's what that looks like. Are they empowered to shift change, to make culture change, all of that? That's what equity and inclusivity looks like. Diversity is natural. Things and people are naturally different. My sister and I are best friends, raised in the same house, and we couldn't be more like night and day.
Yeah.
That's diversity, right?
Right.
But do we both have the ability to share equitably in our house? I'm the oldest, I get more of a say. At least that's what in my head.
Right.
In my head, that's how that works, right? So,
Oh, I see here this comment just came in. Upward mobility for BIPOC communities is key.
most
Absolutely. I
certainly.
actually have more questions based off what you just said, but I know we got to take questions. I wanted to ask you about, about like a national Fortune 500 company. I want to ask you about reparations, stuff that isn't even on this list, stuff that just came up through the
Ooh,
questions, yeah,
I'm all
through your
about reparations.
conversation, and lots of things. But we'll cover that in the next session. I know we got a question here. Let's see here. Okay, cool. So this is from Zishan, he's the co-founder. How does retention statistics at work directly relate to POCs being able to share contrary opinions?
What we know um, is that okay, let me go back. Let me go back to what I said. Remember when I talked about taking up space, right? So that people can be their multidimensional selves. For the most part, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are accepted in professional spaces the more they ascribe to whiteness, right?
Right.
And by whiteness, you're right. Okay. So, and most certainly that deals with everything from colorism to speech and right, how they articulate, where they wear their hair, all of that. The closer they are to whiteness, then, that is the better they are able to move and be promoted and basically have more success. Retention deals with a lot of times we have companies, they bring people in, but bringing people into hostile environments does not make them want to stay.
Yeah.
So they bring people in, but then those same people that they're asking, right, very much, especially in the last year, in the year of George Floyd, but just in history, we ask Black women to be the head of these diversity committees and to lead these change, but we don't support them and undergird them in that. So what happens is they seem as though they are being adversarial or contentious and saying this is where the issues are and this is where the problems are. They voice these things and then they're excommunicated and or fired from those same
Wait.
positions because basically we didn't make you comfortable. You're not comfortable in the fact that I just told you things need to change,
Right.
right? So when it comes to retention, sharing contrary opinions is two-part. One, there can be issues, and that is where that support comes in. That's why when I come into a space, I'm only talking to leadership first. If I can't talk to your leadership about what we're about to do, then I'm not going to work with the company, period. Two, it's also incumbent upon the Black, Indigenous, and people of color in those spaces. This is where we have to empower each other to take up space. All right. I share a personal story. A few years ago, I had faux locks. Those are the locks, but without the commitment. Okay. you can take them out. And the night before that I was going to go to work, I had a whole breakdown in my floor. I mean, I cried and I was like, oh my God, I cannot wear these to work. Why would you get these? And I was cute. My hair was gorgeous.
Yeah.
But I was so apprehensive. I was like, they're going to think that I'm a radical, that I'm going to, there's no way that I can share and train these white physicians with
Yeah.
these locks in my head because
Yeah.
of how I was going to be viewed, right? That's internalized racism. That is something that all Black, Indigenous, and people of color have to reckon with. And on the flip side, our white counterparts have to reckon with internalized dominance, period, right? The reason that those contrary opinions and things like that make a difference is because we are not often being our multidimensional selves.
Yeah.
We are conforming to those same ideals of what whiteness is and what professional, looks like. But the
Yeah.
more we take up
Professional.
space, exact professional,
Yeah.
but the more we take up space, the more that we are our multidimensional selves in those spaces, the more we empower those behind us to do so. So when you voice opinion that's contrary, you're not kicked out because I'm sure someone else has voiced that opinion. And eventually, it's kind of like if you are on your seventh marriage, something can't be wrong with everybody. If everybody has this issue, at some point, the company and leadership has to say, okay, what is the issue? Really, what are we looking at?
What sort of advice would you give off your response? What sort of advice would you give to folks that are navigating this in real time, particularly even remotely right now, perhaps until they get back into the office? I mean, you're in a you're in an environment primarily dominated by mostly white coworkers, perhaps that may or may not have been exposed to too much diversity, maybe feeling uncomfortable when you share your multi-dimensional self, as you put it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you sort of navigate that, and how do you change culture?
Stop biting your tongue. Stop biting your tongue. Who you are is who you are. And it permeates every single part of your being. And whether you're comfortable enough to show it is one thing, but you bring it in every single situation. There are meetings that you're having right now, and you have an idea. And that idea may have come from something that's completely cultural. Maybe I had a great idea at my institution, and it came from, the June bug, right?
Right.
This,
Yeah.
that is cultural. But if it's going to be the next great idea, let me share it. And yes, it's going to come with some trepidation. Yes, it's going to come with some fear. But for me, in order to do what I do, to be able to do it the way I do it, I had to find for me the intersection of authenticity and integrity. Find that for yourself. What does that look like? What is that intersection of you being who you are and not hiding who you are look like, right? There is a professional way to do all of those things. I speak Ave. I say often, even though I love subject verb agreement, and even though I most certainly can speak the King's English with the best of them as a principal's daughter, Ave is my first language.
Yeah.
And those are things that I don't even think about, right?
Right.
Whether it's on fleek or all of these things that we
Yeah.
say. But I don't go into all of my workspaces and say, okay, I see you, right?
Right.
In Ave, I see you mean that's a compliment, right?
Right.
In standard American English, I see you talks about visual or, clarity and acuity, right?
Right. Yeah.
These things mean different things. Understand that when you bring your whole self in a space, you are one, giving license to other people to see you in that space. But Black, Indigenous, and people of color have to learn about white people from the time that they're born.
Yeah.
From the time that you're born, you learn how to operate in white spaces, and you learn how to be uncomfortable. So to my white people that are seeking to be allies, it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. But I promise you, those Black, Indigenous, and people of color are willing to share some of that uncomfort that they experience on a daily basis.
Right.
A daily basis. Black people and people of color are taught to not make other people uncomfortable, to not stand out, right? Because there are these consequences. Revolution and change comes with consequences. If I'm only willing to say things when it's at no personal cost to me, then I'm really not willing to do so. That's performative, whether you are Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, right? If I'm only willing to do this when there is no expense, when there is no capital needed, that's not really allyship. I think of allyship as being a cultural diplomat. You are a diplomat for whomever or whatever identity you're seeking to be an ally for. But the other part of that is once I take you into this foreign land, I make sure you're welcomed, and I make sure that you have the microphone.
Right.
Are you centering the right voice? Right? That's imperative.
A sort of let's say a junior level employee or a low level employee that's non-white, non-Black, someone like say myself and a lot of the folks that are watching, what can they do to be an ally in the workplace without say being in the boardroom?
You don't have to be in the boardroom. So I love quotes, and anybody who gets to know me knows that I'm going to have a million of them, and it's what I do. So for this one, I'm quoting Barack Obama.
Okay.
Barack Obama says one voice can change a room. And if one voice can change a room, then it can change a city. And if it can change a city, then it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation. And if it can change a nation, it can change a world.
Mm-hmm.
Do not discount your voice. Your voice is powerful. So if you are seeking to be an ally in those spaces, you don't have to be in the boardroom. You've been in meetings where someone was being talked over. One of the most powerful things that I have ever seen was for someone to say, hey, like a male colleague. So I was in a meeting. There was
Yeah.
I'm a black woman. My friend, she's a brown woman. And then there's a white woman, right? So there's black, brown, and white woman. And then all of these white men and two black men in the room. And this one white man kept talking over us. And his counterpart said, how about we let her finish a sentence? That's allyship.
Right.
All right. That's what that looks like. Let me tell you what you just did for her. For her, you said, you damn right. Right. That's what she's saying on the inside. Like she's all kinds of excited. But for your counterparts, what they saw is that that person has an ally.
Right.
And that I'm not like that. There's a shield there now. And that person is protected in a different way, not in a savior type way, but that I'm standing arm in arm with this person.
Right.
That's what you do in those spaces. You amplify voices that are already there, and then you endorse those voices once they're there. You say, man, I really like the example Amber gave when she did this. I really like the idea Amber had. Or that's going to look like sometimes giving up that same seat. What we saw a lot, or last year where white CEOs saying, I'm giving up my spot for, this and that. Now, there were people going, well, they worked hard for that. They shouldn't have to give up this, and that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you, like I tell everybody, the only uncontested candidate on last year's presidential ticket was white supremacy. And the reason I say that is because we saw two 70-plus-year-old white men deciding, and America was supposed to decide who was going to lead the country. Do you honestly mean to tell me that there were no Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or even women, right, that would have made excellent candidates? Or did those same barriers that we talked about, such as money, social determinants of health, access to resources, access to education, put barriers in place that didn't allow them to do that, right? So when I say the only uncontested candidate was white supremacy, that's what I mean. It's not that those white men didn't work for those spaces. It's not that they did not work hard and put in their time. The other thing is there were Black men and women who also put in time, but they were not given access. We still see these headlines that say, first Black person to XYZ. That narrative isn't correct. It should say, first Black person, white people allowed to do XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Because see, when you see that, you get to think that one Black person is special, that before them, it couldn't have been done, and that there was no one who was available to do it. That's not true.
Right. That's true. Yeah. See what you're saying.
There were people who guarantee you were just as intelligent that didn't have the opportunities and access. So when we say, or you see people giving up those spots, it's simply an acknowledgement that while it may not be you, that they've had the turn. White men have had their turn.
Yeah.
It is not saying, oh, white men are bad. It's simply saying it's okay if they take a step back for a little while. If this time we make society with the voices and the hands, all the voices and hands that are here and that are necessary to do so. Because until society works for the most vulnerable of us, then it truly works for none of us.
I love that. That's awesome. Is that a quote too, or is that your quote?
That's me. That was
okay.
Me. That was
yes.
Me.
I share quotes all the time on the daily. That's amazing. I mean, we got a lot of questions left, and I'm sure folks probably have, a lot of information to think about after this session. They go back home or reflect on and come back with some more questions. Exactly. And come back with the questions on the next sessions. I guess one last thing that I wanted to ask you about, just real quick, it wasn't on my list of questions, but based off what you said, in private, because I know there's a lot of folks working in that environment that we just talked about right now. How can people approach other Black coworkers in private about becoming an ally without it being weird or aggressive or a lot of the other sort of unpleasant sort of reactions you could face by trying to do, you might have a good intention, but then you might be met with sort of an unpleasant reaction like, hey bro, lay off, or hey, I don't want to talk about that. What's the right way or the healthy way to do it, the advisable way to do it?
First and foremost, and I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible, you do your research first. Do your research and you do the work first. A lot of times, and follow my YouTube channel, because I have all these tips that I call tickets to inclusivity on my YouTube channel.
Okay, I follow it. Everybody else subscribe.
Subscribe, yes, subscribe. So do your work first. Before you go to that Black person, you need to know what you're seeking to do. You need to know why you're doing it. You need to know why Black Lives Matter. Decide that before you talk to them. Decide how you feel, and if you are ambivalent about whether Black Lives Matter before you come to that Black person, because it's going to show up. 2, you know what? Okay, you're a person of color as well. You know when someone's talking to you because you're South Asian, right? Has there ever been a time someone was talking to you and you didn't know that they were talking to you because of that reason? No, we
all
know.
The gigs that I get.
Right, we know. So it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. I know it. So you said how to do it without being uncomfortable. Who told you you get to be comfortable?
Right.
Who told you that dismantling systems of oppression and that dismantling things that are impeding people's access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is supposed to be comfortable? It's not comfortable for the people that are experiencing the barriers. So you don't get to be comfortable. What you do get to do is learn about the history, speak about it in context, and then make your desire known. And that comes by being honest and authentic, saying, hey, Amber, listen, I'm a white woman. And I'm telling you, I'm giving you examples from my own life.
Yeah.
I'm a white woman, and I don't know what to do. I want to do something. I want to help.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times what happens is they say, what's the big thing I can do? And then a part of me goes, or I tell them, we haven't really found the manager of racism yet, but when we do, we will be sure to put them in your face. Okay. We will be sure to let you know that the manager of racism is available and you can come talk to them. Right. Because that's it. You can book an appointment, because what you've said in that space is that I want to do the big thing, as though people for centuries have not been trying to dismantle systems of oppression. Right. So understand your power and privilege, whatever that is. I am an ally for my trans brothers and sisters. As a cisgender female, when I come in that space, I acknowledge my power and privilege as it relates to society at large, right? And I am going to make sure that I'm centering those voices. And I ask them, what can I do? A lot of times people will go out into these communities and they're going to rearrange the whole park, and they're going to put, all the new playground equipment and put everything out there. And the people are like, I just needed socks.
Right. Yeah.
Find out what they want. Ask them. Yeah. It's the same thing as asking how people are like, Amber, do you say Black or do you say African American? That's based on how people identify. I'm Black. I'm black. All right. I'm just regular old Black. Why?
Right.
Because for me, I like to ascribe to the diaspora. So it's different based on where you are. Do the work yourself. Don't put that learning on me. Know that you're going to get it wrong.
Right.
It's like speaking a foreign language. You're not going to get it right. And so one day, hopefully, like McDonald's will be a client. But until then, how you go to McDonald's and they get your order wrong every time. You ask for ketchup and they give you jelly. You ask for paper towels and they give you, pancakes. You know what we do? We show up the next day smiling, ready to let them get it wrong again. That is kind of how I'm asking you to do with cultural conversations.
Can everybody, one second, I'm sorry. Can everybody hear you? Can everybody hear her? Someone could put like a raise their hand or something if they could hear. So go ahead and say something, Amber. I think I lost the audio. I'm not sure if it's me or if it's you. Can someone put up a comment? Can't hear? Okay, yeah. No.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now. Yes, we can hear you now. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I don't remember the last thing I said, but I was saying as long as you show up ready to get it wrong again, then you're going to be okay, right? And allow for grace. Understand that while you may have all the good intentions, that Black person or person of color has possibly experienced 17 people who look like you, possibly in the same week, that
Yeah.
said the same thing, but it didn't turn out that way. It wasn't a positive experience. Allow grace for that. Acknowledge that, you know what, they have a history that says they're going to be mistrusting, and I need to honor that, right? I need to honor that that history allows for that mistrust, and that the same way we would prove ourselves in any other situation, you may have to prove that you're going to be, uh, excuse me, that you're going to prove that you're going to be a good ally. Or I'm looking for co-conspirators at this point.
Awesome. Thank you so much for staying on a little longer. Thank you, audience, for saving the day, giving us the feedback in real time about the audio. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to, part 2, part 3. I'm sure people are going to come with their questions. I know a lot of people enjoyed this conversation. Some people had to take off, but I'm sure they got a lot of value. And so happy to have met you. And we'll talk offline any way that we can assist you, promote you. We'll share some more clips from your TED Talk, other resources that you have on your page, any other way that we can assist.
On the page too, as well. I'll share this one on the YouTube page. So
that... Oh, perfect. Yeah, I can send you the file tonight. Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I think with that, we're going to call it a night. Thank you, Amber. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.